Hey guys, am I live? Okay, I'm live. I can see the chat. Once again, guys, welcome to the stream. This is Anurag with the goanchesstrio, and today again we'll be continuing the middle game series that we are going to do for the next 14 days. And today, as you can see, we'll be covering the pawn structures. We're going to try to understand different pawn structures, the formations, pros and cons, and also the different breaks possible. Guys, you can hear me, right? Yeah, I think things are okay. Different breaks possible and what you should go about in the position. Uh, Hello, everybody. Good morning and evening for us. Okay, so let's get started. Let me just quickly get my board here. Just one moment, guys. Just stop my board. Okay, why is this not coming? Okay. Yes, I think we're good. Okay, you can see on the screen here, and as you can see the pawn structure now, we are just going to look at some formations and try to understand different things possible. And you all can definitely mention in the chat also if you all have any ideas and things that you would like to pop. I'm reading the chat also simultaneously, and good to see you all once again. Hello, everybody, whoever is new here. And now let's look at this structure, and you can see different things happening in the position right away. First of all, uh, does anybody know the different formations? Well, you don't really need to, but I'll just highlight some of them. Like if you see this is basically a pawn wedge. The other things, the simpler things that you can anybody highlight for me or tell me? Like I highlighted a pawn wedge for you. What else can you see in this position? Of course, you cannot see a king here because this is not a legal position, but we are trying to understand the different pawn structures and what is happening in this position. So let's say we saw one thing, which is the pawn wedge. The second thing is double pawns. Now, double pawns are considered not to be ideal, but that is not always the case, as we will be seeing through examples and all after we go through some structures, and we'll see how to continue, what exactly you should worry about, things that matter, where you should place your pieces, etc., why it's important sometimes, why it's better to sometimes get double pawns, why sometimes it isn't, etc. So you can see the different things already here. Now some people must also see that this is considered to be a pawn chain. It's double pawns, but that's a pawn chain. Here also white similarly has a very nice pawn chain. Then the other things to consider, pawn islands. Let's just get rid of this arrows once again. Pawn islands, like you can see that black has three pawn islands, you can say. White on the other hand has two. You can see that this is one pawn island, this is other pawn island. So these are the basic things about the pawns and pawn structure that you have to know. Now what exactly you can improve, how exactly you can get rid of the double pawns. Let's say you're white here. You can also see one more thing, by the way. Isolated pawn on d5. Yes, somebody did mention in the chat, that's an isolated pawn. Similarly, a3 is an isolated pawn, but always the center isolated pawn is going to be more of an issue than the side isolated pawn. But anyways, both are isolated. Now let's say you want to improve the position as white. What would you do? You would want to get rid of your double pawns or make further weaknesses. Now we do not have pieces on the board, so we are only going to move pawns. But let's say you want to improve your position just a little bit. What would you try to do? You can try to get rid of double pawns, prevent your opponent from pushing his own pawns, or try to get rid of his weaknesses, make a pass pawns, etc. You can try to improve in this position. So one way that white can go about in this position, let's say, is something like g4. Now we have no pieces, but this is an example, because what you're trying to do, let's assume that you had a piece here somewhere, f into g4, king to g4, and now once the pawns are gone, you can push and try to create a pass pawn. So that is an improvement. That is what you're trying to do. Now this is called a breakthrough. That also we'll be looking at as we go along. There's one more thing that white can do, that is restrict your opponent's pawns from progressing and instill more further weaknesses in his camp. Let's say we push this move a4 here. What has a4 done exactly? Well, you're not allowing b5 to come. No, people in the chat must be excited at b5 and I will queen the pawn first. But no, that is not what we are looking at. We are trying to restrict this pawns from going further. And now you have another weakness. Can anybody in the chat let me know what this pawn on b6 is called? Hello to everybody in the chat. Yes, I think backward pawn, that's exactly, somebody there has already said it, Abel. So that's a backward pawn where, let's say, a piece which can exploit a backward pawn is a rook that can immediately attack that. Also, when you push a4, you also create a nice square here that is an outpost that some piece can actually occupy. And most important thing is we have a backward pawn to play against. Now, let's say you had a position like this, and again, you want to exploit more weaknesses. You have pieces d5. You can easily play c4 and make a pass pawn, but then you should take a step back and see whether I can really exploit this pawn. If I cannot, then c4 is not really a bad move, because if you see, just like I played a4 and I made him a backward pawn, similarly, if black places a rook on c8, you already have a backward pawn on c3 too. So you can exchange your weakness. Let's say you kill c4, you exchange for the d5 pawn, you get rid of his isolated pawn, but in return, what do you get? You get a nice pass pawn, and you get rid of your weakness. Also, you get some open file to play with. So similarly, we'll be doing exercises and looking at games, and you should try to guess according to the position what you should try to improve. Look at the different possible formations, look at different possible ways to continue. And yeah, let's get going with the exercises anyways. Just a moment. Okay, you can see the board, right? Yes, you can see it. So let's say we play through the opening. The opening is not really important or of concern to us, but this is the King's Indian. We can also like assume, like look at some positions and assume which openings that comes from. I can try to take a guess also, and guide you also where exactly such positions. If it's relative to your opening, some of them must be already playing out different openings. So this has come from the King's Indian to those who aren't really aware of it. But let's see what happens. Now bishop e2, black played e5. Now white has 2-3 ways that he can go about this position. What do you think you would do in this position normally? If anybody is aware of the King's Indian structure, they will possibly know what ideas come along in this position. Anybody in the chat, you can let me know what do you think you would do here. Like black is trying to break through with e5, and this is a common idea in the King's Indian to do. But we are trying to focus more on the pawns and understand what is happening, what different things can happen in this position. For example, right away here, hopefully my voice is not really breaking, but right away here, there are different ways that white can continue. He can play d5, and we have a nice pawn wedge to play with. D into e5, let's say d into e5. Now, if you capture, there are some tactics coming on the board, which we will not go into, but we are focusing solely on the position pawn structure here. You have a very symmetrical structure where you have a d5 square to play with, but the problem is black has c6 and he can still control your piece activity there. But on the other hand, you have also let go of the d4 square. Now, it's not really bad or it's not really overly good or something, but this is also one more way to play. The third thing is, let's say we just castle like he did in the game. This also allows black to do something like e into d4, and now we have an asymmetrical structure. The position in the center is opened up. So most of the focus of the game will be right away in the e4 pawn and in the center. Like black will probably play rook e8, where white will play f3 to defend it, or maybe a piece to defend it, depending on the position. But the focus will be right here, and the possible ideas will depend according to the position. Like here now, let's say black is not going to move the knight and play f5, right? That would be terrible because you're just weakening your king. Your king safety, like we saw yesterday, is also an important factor. So what would you do in this position if you wanted to just break your structure? Once again, guys, we are not only looking for the best move, we are just trying to understand different pawn breaks. So what breaks are available for black in this position? Any ideas, guys? It's indeed a tough position to play. That's true. White has complete center control, everything. So black generally looks for in this positions some breaks. We will also look at another move that normally black plays in this position. But one of the breaks, important breaks, like people have said in the chat, is c6 and d5. So we are trying to understand whether this will work or not. That's not what we are looking at, but that's a break which is possible. Clearly, you should try to also understand which breaks are good, which breaks are bad. Like for example, c6 d5 is a decent break here. a6 b5 is a pawn sacrifice here. Is that really what want you do? That is a different story. But c6 d5 is a break here that can open up some pieces and room. Like let's play you play c6. Black's major point is to play d5, because if it doesn't play d5, the entire point of the c6 move will be void. The d6 pawn is now a major weakness that white can actually focus on. Let's say white sees that his d5 is coming on the board. What are the possible moves that white would play here to stop it? A6, C5, B5, Nightbot. Yes, I mean you're talking too much into the theory aspect of it. That is indeed possible. But when you do A6, let's say white plays something simple like bishop E3, B5, Knight C2, and B5. That's a break which is possible in such positions, but it is a pawn sacrifice, and it does like allow some imbalances like Knight D5. But if you're playing a6 and then you start developing your pieces like knight c6 and not going for b5 ever, then the entire point of the c5 move is void. That's what we're trying to understand. When exactly certain moves are good, when certain pawn moves are bad, why exactly certain moves can be done, etc. For example, you would never want to play c6 if you don't plan d5, because otherwise, what's the point? You're just allowing a weakness to be instigated here on d6. So let's say c6. What do you think white will do if he sees d5 to be coming on the board? He will try to stop it. And there are, I think, 2-3 ways that white can stop it immediately in this position. What do you think he would do here? One or two ways will be to directly defend that square, like somebody said queen b3, to directly take care of d5 by itself, so that d5 is not possible. Meaning we are not going to go again too deep, because here I think black has some nice resources up his sleeve, attacking the d4 pawn, d4 knight, which is possible. But that's one way, not the best way, but one of the ways. Another way, let's say bishop g5. Somebody said, yes, Ruben, bishop g5 is a way to pin this and stop d5, because you're attacking the knight and taking enough resources away. But then we have to figure out which one is the best. For example, after bishop g5, black, let's say, plays queen b6. He attacks here, and maybe you instigate some nice ideas because your king is slightly weak. So maybe bishop g5 is not the best idea in this position, because you don't want to give away your bishop here immediately. First of all, that's one important thing. And secondly, black has some tactical resources also. This is the next thing you have to verify. But first, understanding d5 is the most important. So one more way is knight c2 or knight b3, which are probably the best ways to prevent d5 in this position, because you don't run into this unnecessary pins too. Sorry, unnecessary, what is this? You don't run into unnecessary pins like this, and okay, this check I can just move the king, so that's not a problem. But basically c6 d5 is one of the breaks in this position. But now let's just go back to the game. Knight, okay, one more thing, like let's see here. Let's say black plays knight c6. Sometimes this is possible because now if you play knight into c6, b into c6, you double the pawns. Now what do you do in such positions? What do you think black will do? He will try to use his double pawns to some benefit. So any plans, like let's just play h3 here. Any plans from black side in this position that you would do? What would you want to do? h3 is actually even a very bad pawn move actually, which we will come back to in a moment. But what are the possible ideas, or let's say focusing on this? Would you want to play d5 and get rid of your double pawns, or would you use it for something else? Unnecessarily, people would not want to double their pawns, but this is what we're trying to understand. Yes, c5 is one of the ideas where, in the long run, you can think of the d4 square as a possibility where some of your piece can benefit from either your bishop or maybe your knight goes on a long journey here and comes to d4 zigzag all the way. That's also possible, but there is an idea like that. h3 is a bad move because if you play rook e8, right, you don't want to play something like f3, and this is like, some of them must be aware of what this is called. This is like a hole that two three pieces can really benefit from. Just imagine your queen on g3, the knight can immediately come to g3, or even the bishop on g3, black bishop on g3 can be really detrimental to white here. That's a very big hole that you unnecessarily do not want to do in this position with h3 and f3. That's why I don't think h3 will be a good idea. So let's say we play bishop e3, rook e8, f3. This is a much better structure because at least you don't create those holes that you do with h3. So this is also understanding different pawn moves, different breaks, why exactly h3 is bad. And if you play h3, means you should solely focus on either playing f4 and go for something aggressive, or at least after rook e8, don't make those weaknesses. Play bishop d3, and at least you avoid those holes on g3 that you would do in this position. But coming back now, white also has a good way to stop black from getting what he wants. Knight to d4. We all know what he's planning to do. c5, knight to d4. Can you think of a way where white can actually even stop this from happening? Any possible way? Tal games are not enough, I would say, like, but they are definitely in the step towards the right direction, Aryan. You can definitely read the book that he has, Mikhail Tal Best Games. So yes, indeed, white goes c5. Yes, that's the move that you're looking for. You can stop him from going his ideas. And why this kind of pawn sacrifice is good is because if he captures it, he just ends up with a triple pawn. What a formation here. Triple pawn, and he has a weakness on a7 too. So it doesn't really matter, because we can sometimes consider this triple pawns to be as good as a single pawn, because it cannot be really that useful. It cannot move, like, it's not like a connected pawns which can be useful. And here we have the majority on the king side also to play with. So triple pawns can be easily exploited also like this, and it's but the main point of c5 was not only triple his pawns, but also prevent the black from getting the d4 square. Now let's just go one or two moves further. Let's say black plays rook e8 attacking your pawn. Would you take on d6 immediately, or would you wait? Irish pawns, is it? I didn't know that. I am not really good with themes of the names of the things, but very good to know that the triple pawns are called Irish pawns. But would you take on d6 here? What do you think, or shall we defend this pawn here? And how would you defend this pawn on e4 if you really wanted to defend this pawn? Like bishop e3 and queen d2. Are you ready to give away your e4 pawn here? That's definitely not the ideal thing, Shesh. Yeah, you have to wait. But one more thing is, what would you do? Like, you defend with the pawn, you would defend with the piece. Clearly, the best thing is not to take immediately on d6. Like, general principle, okay? Sometimes maybe you have some tactical resources. It's okay to take and get the tactical tactic to work. But here we don't have any immediate tactic. What happens after cd6 is you're not really concerned about this pawn, right? You're not really concerned about him tripling his pawns. So if you take on d6, it gives him an idea immediately to do something. Like, he may think of now pushing d5, which he may have not thought a move before. So he might get some ideas to go immediately in this position, and that's why you can wait. You can wait for a moment or two before you take. Now suppose he attacks the c5 pawn. Well, then you're forced to take. That's okay, but let him attack it, right? What would you defend it with? Exactly. Now this time, instead of f3, why not utilize a piece to defend it? Because it again opens up another idea and some tactical resources. Doesn't create a weakness like f3 or so. doesn't create a weakness, basically not f3 or so, but it doesn't create a weakness on the dark squares. So sometimes bishop f3 can be chosen. It's an odd square for the bishop to be on, but as you can see, black doesn't really have a knight coming to d4 immediately, and maybe you have some tactical resources of your own. Let's say one problem is if the knight comes to e5, like that would be an issue. But the problem for black is he really can't do knight d7, right? You win the pawn on d6 immediately. So what black will have to do, he'll have to defend, and maybe then you are having some tactical resources or so. But basically, c5 was to prevent your opponent's idea. So knight c6 was a decent choice, but the problem is white got a nice c5 here and prevented it. So if you understand what your opponent is trying to do, how you would improve its structure, you can stop him from doing so, instigate more weaknesses. For example, now let's just say bishop b7, okay, just for the sake of it. We Do you know what these are called? These are called hanging pawns, and these pawns can also, they are weak, they defend each other, and they can easily become connected with c5 d5. But in this situation, sometimes they can also let go of something important. For example, let's just go one or two moves deeper. Let's say he plays d5 in this position. Now what are the different things we can do with this, and decide on which one you would choose. Like, we can push e5, e into d5 and give him an isolated pawn, or just keep it as it is and continue. What do you think you would choose here in this position? Bishop g5 is what you wanted to play, Cyprus. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. But right now on this position, what do you think you would choose? Immediately when he makes certain moves, you can change the formation of the position. You can exploit some weak squares, especially if there are a lot of pieces on the board. For example, d5. Did it let go of something? Can I exploit it? Bishop on b7. Not very ideally placed here. Based on that, you can make your choices. Okay, queen b3 is also very interesting, very nice. Queen b3 is a tactical resource here because rook b8 is not possible. He'll have to defend his queen piece in an awkward, let's say I play queen b6. What can you do here now? E into d5. Some people are saying e into d5. Okay, we're not going to go too much deep into the variation, but depending on the position, you can see like if he plays d5 here, he has weakened the c5 square too. Can we try to exploit that? That should also be at the back of your mind. E into d5, c into d5. He does get an isolated pawn, but is it a good transition or is it a bad transition? What about if he plays knight into d5? Do I have something there? Now he has weak pawns, but he's also double attack. Like, he's giving us a double attack. Can we do something about it? What would you do in the position here, chat? What would you play? Would you play knight into d5 immediately here, or would you do something different? Would you take knight into d5 here, or do you think you can do something differently? You should also just not, like, because it's an isolated pawn, I will just take knight into d5 all the time. Like, that is also a common mistake. You see the principles: isolated pawn, hanging pawns, backward pawns. Doesn't mean that each and every position this will be a drawback. So after knight d5, e5, he has pieces on the board. And suddenly now his bishop is attacking b2, which you'll have to take care of. And once he pushes d4, he's the one who has a pass pawn and his bishop is active. So probably not a good transition. Let's say after e into d5, he takes c into d5 though. We could have maybe played bishop f3. He doesn't really have the open diagonal. You have prevented him from playing d4. So this is kind of okay. But after knight d5, you're if you take, you're probably not having the time to do both the things. You play bishop f3, you could lose the pawn. Okay, some people must have already got tactical resources up their sleeve, but you could lose it. That's important. So you can definitely think of bishop d2 also as an example. This is a nice move because still white maintains his edge. For example, knight c3, we can take bc3, or we can even take bishop c3 and enter the endgame, because the position now is symmetrical, but it is black who has a little bit of weaknesses. The bishop is not very ideally placed on b7. Rook b1 will immediately come, bishop f3 will come, and white has a slight edge that he can play with in this position. There's one more move which people tend to miss, is a move like queen c1 actually, d2 or c1. You're giving away the bishop like this. Let's say you're giving away, that's the main problem. You give away the bishop and he gets a pair of bishops to play with. We had discussed this yesterday. Sometimes this bishops can be a little bit problem, but here you can see that he has a weak pawn structure, and the possible idea is that white has bishop f3, knight a4, and you can try to target that c5 square, get a rook to c1, target that c6 pawn. You have possible weaknesses that you can easily exploit in this, so it's a good transition for us even if you give away the bishop. The pawn structure is slightly favorable for white here. Anyways, let's go back now. And you understood sometimes double pawns can be beneficial, sometimes they can be detrimental. Now let's just move to one position, and oh shit, do we have the position? No, we don't have it. 1 minute, guys, just getting the board on the board. Yeah, so now here in this position, this has come from the opening itself. uh Nothing important you have missed. You are just discussing some simple things, and of course, you can always check it out later too. Not a problem. But glad that you have joined us. Thanks a lot. And now, here in this position, what would you want to do? Like, we know the double pawns, we know different things possible that are bad for us. You can already see that we have a nice pawn on e5, which gives us nice space advantage. Black has weak pawns. a7 is a weakness. Oh, thanks a lot, Clinton. Appreciate the support. I'm glad that you're here with us and helping us. Whatever support you give us will definitely go towards bettering it. And yes, looking forward to improve the chess in Goa. Thanks a lot, Clinton. Glad you joined us once again. Now here in this position, like, you would want to do something like the next step. Like, what do you do in this position? Any ideas? Like, you can post it in the chat. Like, what do you think you will do? You know the few things that are possible. Now we have a lot of pieces in the on the board. We know different formations. We know different formations, etc. But what is the next thing is that how do you go about it? What are the possible plans? That is also an important factor that is important. Like, let's say white wants to improve. What would you want to do in this? The different plans that are available. Let me just highlight them for you. You can use your pieces for some attack on the king. You can see that he has less pieces there. So possible choice, let's say f4, go for f5 and start like completely thrashing him in. But you have to also consider what your opponent is going to do. He has double pawns and he has a bad bishop on c8. What do you think he's going to do? He's going to play c6, d6 here in this position immediately to try to improve his structure. So let's say you just play f4, he plays d6. Your idea of f5 is stopped right in the way, and suddenly after ed6, even if you play cd6, you no longer have f6 and you have created a weakness here because that move is not really helping us in any possible way. So also don't forget your opponent's ideas also. Based on this, can anybody tell me a move? I just told you what black could possibly do. He wants to get his bishop out, wants to get d6 going. So knight f3 is what you would do. Okay, knight f3 is one possible way. I think there are many ways you can continue here. What else? b3 bb2. That's also nice. And the third way, I think somebody said bishop f3. Yes, right, but bishop f3 is stopping d6 or d5 by itself. Now, if he plays d5, ed6, black can definitely play bd6 and still keep it going. Like, he has some tactical resources that we are not too concerned about. Like bishop c6, he can play bishop h2, queen d6 and solve this problem. But in the process, we have to also understand that he has now created a big weakness here. So it's not really forced for us to capture on c6. All we need to do is now target those weaknesses and use those weaknesses effectively without allowing him any sort of counterplay. What is the next step that you do in such a position here? Once you see such a weak pawn structure, you know your pieces which can actually exploit them. What's the next step? Clearly, you don't want to just finish your opponent immediately here. You're trying to exploit the weaknesses that you have already created. So maybe what you can do in this position is get rid of your some of your pieces or some of the pieces which can give your opponent good counterplay. H3 though, Nightbot, is not a good example. See, H2 is not in the attack. Unnecessary pawn moves is not a good idea. Like say H3, he plays something like Queen F6. Now, let's just say he plays Queen F6. He has a just doesn't attack here. He has a nice hidden idea. Like he will play Queen E5, and now you have a problem here because of your move H3. You play G3, bishop into H3 costs you a pawn, and suddenly black is back in the game with very nice counterplay. You might be even just minus and losing in this position. So unnecessary pawn moves are not really ideal. Okay, this H3 move was not really needed. You could just play knight B3 or knight E4, like some of you all are saying in the chat. Exchange of more pieces. Rook E1, knight F1 is also possible, but here, once you see these weaknesses, pawn islands, you can try to exchange your pieces more often. Knight b3 and knight e4 are two choices, but now let's just take a small test here and tell me which one is better, knight e4 or knight g3, knight b3. I'm giving you two choices here, knight e4 and knight b3, and I want you to tell me why exactly which one is better. Rook e1, knight f1 is also possible. That is also possible. But here, let's say we are trying to exploit weaknesses, then we could go for exchanges. That's the best thing to do. Now, just a small test for you people. Amongst these two moves, which one would you choose? Any particular reason that you would choose one over the other also? Knight b3 is helping us open a file. Very good point. Knight e4 is what many of you all are choosing, aiming at the king side. But then, see, all ideas are not about us only, right? Your opponent also has ideas of his own. So probably you're forgetting something from your opponent's point of view. Once you play something like knight e4, what is it that you have forgotten, chat? I mean, if I was black here, I would be maybe jumping a little bit because I was in a completely minus position, and now suddenly I got a ray of hope here. Pawn will hang, yes, very nice. Pawn is already hanging here, but knight e4, right, will make something else hang for you, like so. Knight into e4, and whenever you see an idea, right, just see where you can better it. This is also like yesterday I was doing this with you. Like whenever you see an idea, see how you can better it. Like bishop h2, I'm sure many of you all saw here. Yeah, king into queen h4. Exactly. There are two ideas possible here. Bishop h2, queen h4, and queen into e4. Now suddenly black wins a pawn here. This is why knight e4 is a big blunder, and you should verify your ideas. When you see a plan, your idea is correct. See where exactly it will benefit more. Knight e4, bishop e4, queen h4 though, maybe even stronger, right? Not really, because white has a defense here with f4 and he stops it. But okay, it's still a weakness for white, and it's still not what white would want in this. He would not want to move the pawn to f4 and weaken his king like this. And simply f4 is not the main focus here. The main focus is here. Like you don't want to allow your opponent to get counterplay in this process. So bishop h2 is the better move, I think, and that simply gives him a pawn. One more simple thing, same based on same thing. Knight c4 also is similarly a bad move because this can allow bishop h2 and queen h4. Once again, don't play queen h4 in a hurry. He's attacking d6. He will just snap and coolly take a pawn there. So bishop h2, king h2, and then queen h4 followed by queen c4. And the second thing is this basic bishop e6 can also pin and create further problems for you. Now, which one? That's not important right now. We'll do that some other time. Which one is important? How to make choices. But here d5, then you can simply play ed6, bd6, and if you take cd6, you can just pick up a free pawn on c6. That was one way. White played another way and played knight b3, just like we had seen a moment ago. Knight b3 is also a good move because although it doubles up pawns, it gives us a nice open file and yet another weakness on a7 that we can try to target. Because if he moves, let's say he plays d6, what would you do in this position? Would you go ahead and capture E into d5, A into d6, or would you do differently? How would you want to go about it? The Greek gift wouldn't be possible. We'll be seeing some Greek gift exercises in the later stages, guys. So do join us for all the 14 days if it's possible. That'd be really lovely. Today we'll try to focus more on pawns and how to work around this some of the structures, like how to play in certain positions, where exactly your pieces belong, which are the right captures, which are the right pushes, etc. is what we will be doing today to the people who are new in the chat. Yes, bishop f3 is better. Like unnecessarily always, just like unnecessarily you don't push your pawns, you unnecessarily also don't capture unless it's needed. So bishop f3 is a nice way here because you're attacking c6. I mean d into e5, you just play bishop c6 and you're also winning a second pawn on a7. So you end up being a pawn up, which is definitely good. And if he pushes d5, he still keeps his double pawn. He would do it better if you do it like this. Now he's able to freely play d5. But if he does it this way, directly d5, that's even worse for him because he has a further weakness on the double pawns. The double pawns are a further weakness. What would you do in this position? Again, like how to continue in such simple positions where you have a slight edge. This is also an important thing. F4, instead of f4, bishop f3 is better. Once again, you don't want to unnecessarily create weaknesses. This is again allowing him also to give you a isolated pawn on e5, which can try to exploit. And your king also, like unnecessarily, you don't want to do this. It's not a blunder, but it's not very unnecessary. Sorry, bishop f3, d5. What is the next thing? I knew it. People will play c4 here and immediately try to open up. See, in the process, when you make your pawns like push like c4, you're also allowing your opponent to get something in return. You just gave him a pass pawn unknowingly. Now, we are in the middle game stages and there are a lot of pieces where this wouldn't be a problem. But it's not like c4 wins us a pawn. c4 does many things which are detrimental to us also. Like, first of all, the pass pawn. Secondly, do you really want to get rid of his double pawns? Bishop e3 and c4. Everybody is focused on c4 because c4 attacks c6 and d5 and that's the best way to go, right? You get an immediate threat here. So nice tactic coming in. dc4, bishop c6 and that's it. See, c4 is not a good move here because after bishop e6, are you really winning material? Are you winning a pawn? No. What have you created now? What had we seen in the first position in the exercise? I told you some thematic patterns. Now here, if you take cd5, you just helped him improve his position and you gave yourself double pawns. I don't think that's what anybody wanted to do. Secondly, the thematic positions that we had seen earlier, you can relate to it here also. Let's say you see this pawns, right? b3, b2. They are double pawns. That's not the main thing. But imagine like let's say you plays rook e8, rook b8 and attacks your pawn and further consolidates with something like b5. I'm just playing some random move, guys, so don't start questioning it. Let's say I play a5. What do you see with this thematic structure? You see a backward pawn on b3 which you created because of your one move c4. You gave him a pass pawn, you give yourself a backward pawn and you have no way to get rid of it also. Like b4 is not possible, cd5 is not possible. So what you did is c4 is definitely worse. It's a one move idea and that's why you should take a step back, breather and verify again and see what is the best way to continue in this position. It's definitely not c4. What is it going to be if it's not c4? It could be just simple piece development. Like let's say bishop e3. There is no rush. You can wait for him. Let's say he plays a5. Further attack that weakness with queen d2. He defends with bb4. Improve your position with c3. No need to play c4. But at the right time, let's say you're winning some material. For example, right here in this position. Maybe not here in this position. But otherwise, like let's say c4. I was thinking we can do a double attack here. And maybe after bishop e6, rook a5, you're winning some material. Then it's okay. But preferably, you can take it slow, take it easy, just attack the weaknesses that he has created and slowly go about it. Don't rush with your pawn moves, don't unnecessarily make pawn moves, and always verify your ideas. The most important thing. c4 was a bad choice there, as we learned from what happens after bishop e6. You didn't get anything, you gave your opponent everything. Just got into a better position because you made that big mistake. Okay, so knight b3, we'll see what happened in the game. Black played d5 directly. White played e into d6 here. There's a reasoning behind this, okay? E into d6 and black played bishop into d6. And this is what we were trying to exploit like earlier in the moment. Now, black played bishop d6 is that cd6 leads to bishop f3. Yeah, bishop f3, and if he plays something like queen c7, this would have been probably the better way to go, guys, but this we'll see in a different exercise, like how to active defense and what is the best way to continue in certain positions. Rook e1, and black was coming under a lot of pressure very quickly here, and thus he made the decision to go bishop d6, which he felt was the better idea. White just simply played simple chess here without moving pawns, nothing doing here, just simple chess. He made one important thematic move here. Can anybody tell me which thematic move is possible in this position besides developing your own pieces? I hope, Gauri Tane, you're not saying queen d4 right here, right? A very nice move to attack a7, but a very nice move for black to be in, because what is it that happens after queen d4, guys? Come on, quickly. Definitely, like, we'll play c5 and get rid of that attack on a7, isn't it, guys? c5 is a good move, right? Anybody in the chat, guys? Yeah, definitely bishop h2, not c5, because bishop h2 and you exploit queen d4. Very simple tactic here that you should be aware of. Don't forget your opponent's ideas too. But what is the thematic move that you're looking for? A thematic move, if you're saying, Ruben, it's f4 here, then that's definitely not the thematic move, because we have just studied why we are not playing f4 for a reason here. And I hope you're not telling me f4 right here in this position. Yes, everybody in the chat has gone boom with bishop into h2 here, and yes, that's definitely the simple tactic which is coming, and we lose the queen. But what about a simple thematic move in this position that you should know? Bishop e3 is development. I specifically told you it's development, but a thematic kind of thing, like not always possible. Possible only because of certain pawn moves, etc. Certain changes in the structure. This kind of moves are possible only because of this. Bishop f3 is nearly possible everywhere, right, guys? Like, it doesn't need the ab3. I just highlighted this for you, right? What is the thematic thing here? We can, anybody in the chat, like, what is the thematic maneuver in this position to improve your pieces? Bishop e3, bishop f3, all are good. They're all good. I completely agree with you. Rook a4 is the thematic maneuver here. Vijay, you're right about that. Sorry, rook a4 is what I said. And you can activate the rook to the other side, or maybe use it in the center. And the third thing, that is attack this. Okay, attack this weak pawn on c6 with rook c4 and bishop f3. Thinking ahead. Bishop f5, and white went with bishop d3, and this is what I was telling you earlier. When you have a better pawn structure, you can get rid of your opponent's pieces and exchange some of the material. But here we will stop in this game. We have learned what white did: bishop d3, queen f6. And one more small thing I will tell you: when you have these positions on the board, right, if he has a bishop here aiming at h2 or so, he always has ideas of queen e5 and attacking queen h2. So if you really want to create a flight square for your king, don't play the move h3. Preferably, if you have already exchanged the light square bishops, g3 is a better idea to play. It helps you keep the king closer to the center. Your main goal is to attack these weaknesses. So most likely, you can even initiate an exchange of the queens. And g3 does a very good job of preventing any sort of counterplay that's available there on the king side. h3, it does, maybe he can play queen e5, and you don't want to do weaknesses like f4 unnecessarily. Unnecessarily avoid the pawn moves, and don't do it this way, because this always gives black again some chances for counterplay. Like, you could go wrong somewhere, so you don't want to do that. g3 is the better idea in such position. It takes care of nearly everything, and this is very important, especially if he is missing a light square bishop. Both of you are missing it, but if he's missing a light square bishop, you don't do this when he has a light square bishop and you don't have a bishop also on top of that. Like, so you don't do that in those positions, but here you can definitely do it. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. Okay, it's on the screen. So this has come from an opening, and some of you all maybe in the chat are aware of which opening this has come from. Anybody in the chat can guess which opening this has come from? Yes, it has come from Rho Lopez, but do you know which exactly the line is? It's not really important, but it has come from some of the Rho Lopez structures. It's come from the four knight variant, four knights. Yeah, Rho Lopez four knights. Yes, four knights variant of the game. Why exactly asking Olympiad? Like, okay, I don't know what you're asking, Dragonheart, but okay, yeah, it's come from the four knights variant here, and this is what, like, sometimes you can try to guess which move, which structure, which opening it has come from, but that doesn't mean you only look at structures which are relevant to your opening. You can try to get an understanding from different games, look at different structures, so that even if structures transpose, then you would know what to do in that position. Now, in this position, White has got a double pawn to play with. Is that bad? Not yet. Not yet, because there are a lot of pieces. Yeah. Rubinstein line. We have Nandi telling us that. Once again, I'm not really good with the names and the ECO codes and all that. But Nandi has Rubinstein. This is definitely not London system, Arik. It's definitely not London system. So, yeah. So here now B into C3. And we can see there's an imbalance first, which is White has a pair of bishops, Black doesn't. And White has double pawns in return for that, Black doesn't. So White just played rook e1. Now, just because you have double pawn doesn't mean that that's always a bad thing. Sometimes it can also be a good thing. It depends on what is going on. Here now, Black is having an annoying pin to deal with. White has the pair of bishops. But you should also know as White what ideas you would follow in this position. For example, rook e1 played in the game has an idea of its own. Can you tell me which idea it would be? What would you try to do in this position? If you play rook e1, what am I hinting at? Yes, Rubinstein has a very similar kind of structure. An endgame that he has played against uh, stands all the pieces, which we will do when we do the endgame streams, which will show you those positions in the endgame when we do the endgame series. Right now, we're still in the middle game to play d4. Exactly, to play d4. What are the other ideas that White can do in this position? The other breakthroughs that White can initiate in this position. That is also an important thing to keep in mind, because then you can decide what you would want to do. D4 is one of the breaks. What's the other break? Bishop sacrifice. Well, that is not a break, Krishna. Maybe f4, yes. F4 is definitely another idea in this position where knight d2, the knight can move and you can initiate f4 in the position. We'll just see what happened a couple of moves in the game. Rook e1 and Black played knight d8. White played d4 to break it. Black played knight e6 and White played this. This is a new development, but White played this move, bishop c1, coming back all the way from g5 to c1 because he's eyeing towards a3. He can improve his bishop here, and he doesn't want to get in the way of any of his pieces also. Like bishop d2 would get in the way of his queen. Let's say he wants to do something there. But basically, bishop c1 is a nice idea because it can develop to the other side. Now, let's say Black plays knight d7 here. Yeah, let's say Black plays actually not knight d7. So what does he play here? He plays knight 97 is also possible here, guys, but okay, let's play the normal rook d8. What would you do? Based on, we are only focused on pawns, okay? So I'm sure many of them will already be aware of the ideas, normal ideas in this position. I want you to just think of 2-3 different things you can do. Keep it as it is, d into e5, d5, or just go for some piece development or so in this position. What do you think you would do in this? Would you push d5 here, or would you not push d5? Or would you take on e5 also? Like, would you not take on e5? How do you think you will draw this, come to this decisions? Yeah, so everybody in the chat, like most of you are saying bishop a3, but I want you to tell me what would happen if you push d5 or e5? Are there any drawbacks? Are there any benefits? And if you had to choose only between these two moves, right? Let's say I'm giving you a very difficult decision here. I'm sure everybody is thinking of bishop a3. This is because I told you bishop came all the way from here to here. He's definitely going to come to something, and bishop a3 is an idea here to try to pin and maybe utilize some tactical d into e5 to win a pawn. But let's say I'm going to give you a very hard decision here. I'm going to ask you to choose only two moves, d5 or d into e5. Which one do you think would be the way to go if you had to choose? Both the moves are not very ideal because they do some damage to us, but which one would you choose? You would choose d5 here, is it? Okay, most of y'all are choosing d5. d5, you want to close the center. Then what do you want to do next in this position? Like guys, like after d5, let's assume that I'm playing knight c5. Now you can see that the knight on c5 is perfectly placed. What would have been a good idea for white in such positions? He would want to create something on the queen. You just close the center, right? When you close the center, what are you trying to achieve? You're trying to play on some side of the board. You don't want to play, you have just committed to rook e1 where you wanted to play in the center. Now, what would you open or where would you try to improve your position? Because in such kind of structures, right, normally white has a pawn on b2. Normally, at least he would prefer to, and he would play b4, c4, and then immediately try to open with c5, which we'll see in a moment or two. We'll see some game based on that. But here we see that we have double pawns. The knight is completely solid on c5. Where would you try to open up the position? Exactly, you don't really have a good way to open up. You should decide where you're going to have, what is your main focus. Like here, after playing bishop c1, you just retreated from here. You could have kept it on this side. You retreated to c1. You have allowed him a solid outpost on c5, and you are closing the center on top of that, which is not really good because now you're just stuck here. You'll play knight d2 to defend, let's say. You still find it very difficult to open up on that side of the board, and black would be really happy with some important exchanges like bishop d7. If you exchanges the light square bishop, it becomes even easier for white to play, for black to play. So possibly the better choice in this position would be to play d5, because now the structure, yes, I completely agree, the structure is horrible, not very ideal, but you have a lot of pieces on the board, and that's the key point. You have a lot of pieces, we can utilize them. Let's say bishop a3 directly not possible, at least we have some a4 and bishop a3, maybe the bishop can come in there, trying to target his queen. One more important thing, like okay, you have some e5 weaknesses also, but one more important thing is you should also understand what kind of pieces you have. Now, this is not dependent on pawns, but what kind of pieces you have also relates to what kind of pawn structure you should go for. For example, here you have two bishops. The bishops you should remember, the bishops you should remember are always better in open positions, whereas knights are excellent in close positions because they do the jumping, right? They will jump around here, here. They will keep jumping around. He can go here and then maneuver all the way there because he can jump around. Whereas the the bishop cannot do the same. Just because you are blocked, you cannot just say like, I'll jump around here and go to f5. It's not possible. It will be a difficult route for this bishop to go to. That's why d into e5 is generally better. It also depends on where your pieces are placed, how your pieces are placed, and what kind of pieces you also have. Now you have bishops. They can be useful in open positions. Maybe the knight will have some difficulty. Definitely black is better here, but this is the better choice compared to d5, depending on the position and your composition of pieces. Anyways, that was it. And here 92 and f4 is another idea for white, which I'm sure most of you all will be aware of. But now we'll see one more position, which is very similar to this position, guys. But just give me one moment, and I will just get it here. Yes, you can see on the board here, very similar position on the board, but a big difference. What is the difference? Very similar kind of position, let's say. We have the pawn, this is called a pawn wedge, by the way, guys, like that I'm sure everybody is aware of now. Uh, Hello, Karthik, good to see you. Yes, now in this position you have the pawn wedge, and this has come from positions which are similar to king's Indian, they can come from e4, e5. But basically, we have this nice pawn, beautiful pawn chain, and not a single pawn island. Nobody has a pawn island yet. What is the relative idea for white in this position? What is the difference? From the previous position, we had a pawn which was doubled, so you could never get rid of this knight on c5. Here, we have a pawn on b2, which I was highlighting earlier. Like, you can get rid of the knight on c5. So how do you go about it? Yes, b3, a3 is the way to go. This is also one more important thing. Now, people must be seeing that a3, let's say he castled. Sorry, he castled. People must be seeing that a3, you have knight b3 and you lose the exchange. But this is not the main, this is definitely a concern which you can take care of with queen c2. But let's say he plays bishop d7. There is one more important thing that you have to keep in mind in such positions is you don't go with a3 immediately. It's important that you do b3 in such positions, because if you want to focus on b4, okay, if you want to allow your opponent to get complete control, you're most welcome to play a3 in the position, but I'm sure most of you will not be wanting that. So b3, because now whenever he plays a4, you always have b4. An important push to remember. Let's say he plays something like this. Okay, we are not concerned about that. I'm just making a move. You can play a3 and then later you can push b4 very easily. But if you do a3 directly, then a4 is completely consolidating there, and you can never get rid of this knight on c5 without winning the a4 pawn. You'll have to work very hard for that, because here also you're not winning the pawn. And if you push b3 now, like let's say here you can't even push it, but even if you get somehow, like, your support, like let's say we're just playing some random moves. Let's say you play b3. The problem is that you're not able to get rid of this knight on c5. And after knight b3, b6, you're still not able to create some important breakthroughs. One of the breakthroughs for black in this position in KID or in the similar structures is to open with f5. For white, it is to open with c5. Unfortunately, c5 is not really possible because you're missing the b4 pawn. Thus, the importance of which pawn moves are good, how you structure it. Sometimes players even play the move b3 in a rush here. This also has a point, by the way, because if you play queen c2, sometimes black even pushes a4, and you cannot really play b3 as fast because that ab3 thing comes in the way. So sometimes you can also time your moves. You see a5, you push b3, depending on the position. But it's important that if you want to get a3, b4, you push b3 first, play a3, and then push b4. That's the standard plan here. So now in the position, I will show you why did not go for this. Because if you see, it depends also on the position. We know the idea a3, b3, b4 is the way to go. But white did completely differently. Because if you see, he has to complete his development. And you know what black's ideas are. Black's ideas are to play f5 and open up. Thus white went with a completely different approach here. He played g4 and is going for the aggressive. He went for a complete different idea because he saw that king is castled, and in such positions white can also go for this. Now this is a weakening move that you would not want to do unnecessarily unless you're sure. Like you're weakening a lot of dark squares here. So black played this move, knight e8. Can anybody in the chat tell me what should be the next move for white in this position? The next move is very important for white here. So white to play, what would you do? Thanks a lot, Raviraj, for joining us today. Once again, guys, if you do appreciate the same, then do hit the like button. Your support means a lot. And also, it does bring more people to the channel. So we're glad that all of you are here, and you all can be here for the next 14 days. Same time, 7 p.m. G5 and H4 are two important ideas. I completely agree. Which one is the better idea here in this? H4. Yes, so these are the important ideas. G5 and H4 are very important in this position because one of major black's ideas here is to prevent your pushes And like I said, the dark squares are weak. So let's say after knight g3, your break is not f4 here. You don't want to weaken your e4 and g4 pawns. Your break is mostly based on h4 and you're going to try to advance. Bishop g4 is an annoyance straight away there, holding fort straight away. The second thing is black can also try h6 and even exchange of the bishops with bishop g5. This not many people will be aware of, but let me show you just something instructive here with bishop g5. Now the problem with this is if you exchange the dark square bishops, let's just say this is also played on the board, you can see you end up with a bishop which is completely horrible behind all the tall, like it's like a tall pawn only, you can say, behind all your light colored pawns. And if you play queen g5, well, temporary excitement with double pawns here, but how will you really exploit it? You would have to play h4, open up and get rid of the double pawns, which doesn't really give black any problems. Just plays g6, brings his king, and he's happy with the position because your idea was to attack h4, h5. Now you don't have pieces. Basically, it's just not the ideal thing to do. So h4 is the move in that position. That is very important. G5, actually g5 and h4 both are possible, but one is better than the other because of this. H4 is the better move, but let me just show you what happens after g5. Black can play this move f5 here, and that's why h4 is better. Again, you don't want to really help him open up when your king is this exposed. You have not really got enough pieces in there. Like let's say f4, h4, or maybe even he plays f6 and forces the exchange and maybe get some pieces in the game. I am a little bit not sure what is happening here, but g5 is not the ideal way. h4 is even better because temporarily he doesn't have f5 coming. Your idea of g5 can be initiated or instigated more to later, and black is not going to capture on h4 because once you move your king, you have a very dangerous attack coming here, so it's okay to sacrifice your piece. Now let's see your opponent plays h6. You know the possible ideas that your opponent has. What would you want to do in this position? Can anybody tell me what they would do here? You know what your opponent is planning for after h6, but what would you do? Okay, 1 minute, guys. I think, yeah. Oh yes, bishop h6 is the move. Yeah, you have a tactical resource. So if you give up a pawn like this, you cannot just simply sit down and say, okay, I will control knight h. I'll control bishop g5. Although that would be better than doing nothing. Like this is not as good. He's planning bishop g5. At least knight h3 would be better. But you have a nice tactical resource with bishop h6 here, which quickly gives you like a win only, like straight away, I think. I mean, he can try to exchange queens, but he's a pawn down also. So now I don't think you have to worry too much. Let's just capture here and we just win a piece. He cannot really move the bishop, guys, because you have queen h7, which is a mate. So the king safety, that is also an important part. We did that yesterday. If you haven't, you can check out that video too. And material count, yes, you're materially down, then you have to be a little bit faster. You cannot just take your own time and relax. So you have to be a little bit faster. h6, the main idea was bishop g5. So if he doesn't get h6 here, then most likely your attack will be faster and it will be very difficult for black to hold fort here. Somewhere there will be a nice sacrifice coming in and you will exploit that weak king there on g8. So h4 was the way, and after c6, black went for c6, and you see something surprising happening here with white castling. Again, he has decided to go with an attack on the king side. Why do you think he even castles here? Like, would you even castle on the king side if you're going to attack on if he's already opening up on that side? Not really, but in this position, there is a reason why he did it, because black is not having an immediate way to exploit or attack his king. He has not created a weakness. Like, let's assume that white had played b3. He was confused. He wanted to keep both the ideas. Now let's say black plays something like g6, white plays h4, and black plays something like f5. Do you think he would castle on the queen side? Maybe he would, but he would have some problems also equally to deal with, because a4 is an immediate thing to open up the position or create some complications there. But since white has not done those, not committed to a3 or a4, he can easily castle on the queen side in this position because cd5, he captured knight d5. But even if he captures cd5, guys, you know that b5 would be a way for black to get something going. But b5 is under our control at the moment. So black cannot really immediately create weaknesses or attack a position. So thus it is okay. Now one more small question here, guys. For a4, how do you think you would continue in this position? Would you go for something of an attack, or is there something else? Definitely, I'm sure nobody is going to stop the a pawn with a3 here. I'm sure everybody is not going to stop a3. There is knight b3 coming. So let's not think of a3 and focus on what we could do in this position. So let me know if you have any ideas, guys. Unnecessary pawn moves are also not a good idea. So b4, is it? Am I saying b4 in the chat? What do you think your opponent is going to do next? He's looking forward to b5 himself. Bishop b5 is not a good way. Like when you see certain pawn structures, there are a few things you can see, you can take care of. Like let's say you assuming that he's going to play a3. You should see whether it's a big concern for us. Like let's just play some waiting move. Like rook h2, he plays a3, we have b3, we are holding everything together. Is it a big concern? Not at the moment. So it's okay to allow him a3. If you play a3, it's a big blunder because you're allowing a big hold to happen there and you're allowing knight b3 to come. If you don't have any plan of your own, if you're not seeing anything from your opponent's sides, if you feel like your attack is not fast enough, then you can think of what you can prevent your opponent also from doing. Like here, most likely your opponent is going to go for development, and somewhere his pawn on b7 is actually getting in the way of his own pieces for attack. So he might think of sacrificing the pawn with b5 here. So yeah, I mean, some people said king b1. Yes, king b1 is good. Knight e2 going for development is good. g5 also sometimes is good. But basically, depending on the position, you can choose your moves also. Like here, if you know that he is going to go b5, most likely he might easily play bishop d7 and then play b5. You can be a little sneaky and like prevent him from doing so. Now, if you had to choose, there are two ways, bishop b5 and knight b5, which can stop it. You should not do this unnecessarily, but here I see a point of it. Like there is a reasoning why I would play knight b5. First of all, I completely cancel out his chances of ever playing b5 and sacrificing the pawn to open up the b file. And secondly, if he plays something like knight c7 to exchange, I might as well get some tactic going here with bishop c5, bc5, and I'm effectively utilizing my pawn wedge with a nice tactic with d6. So what did I do in this position? I have a fork and I win a piece straight away. Knight into b5, d into e7. Queen into e7, then bishop into b5, and queen into d2 check. You still end up with a double attack here. And one more thing is, again, effectively utilizing your pawns. Even if you capture on b5, he is unfortunately still getting trapped with g5. I'm using my g pawn there to trap it. But basically, a small thing here so that you're just trying to restrict him. Now, this is not always the best thing to do, or not the best thing to do, but it can be a nice addition. Now, let's say he plays bishop d7, king b1, just getting out of the way. Once again, don't get too tempted here because I think he has rook c8 and he can, you don't want to give your bishop away unnecessarily. He will not fall for this and allow you the trap, let's say, but he has rook c8. So you can play king b1, and let's say he attacks this way. My knight b5 move is not entirely gone to waste because now I can slightly maneuver my position and improve it to a slightly better square where I can defend also, and I can also get some ideas to attack. For example, knight a3. And I can try to get my knight to c4. I'm temporarily stopping a3, and I at least stop b5 for 2-3 moves while improving my position. Now next thing, I can even get my other knight to c3 and completely take over the b5 square if it was possible in this position. But basically, You will be proceeding on the king side later. Yes, of course, knight bot, you will be going this way and starting your attack. This was just something I wanted to share, like what exactly, if your opponent, if you see something, you can try to control it. One more thing, bishop into c5 also sometimes is a good idea, but it depends on where exactly your opponent's pieces are also placed. Because after dc5, he's immediately able to block it with knight d6, and I don't think this is helping us that much, at least not right now. So maybe I would shy away from it, but this also sometimes changing the pawn structure, because once you nullify that knight on c5, black's attack slows down considerably. But I would really like it if did not have a knight on e8. Let's say knight was on f6 or something, then I would 100% take on c5 easily, because he's not able to get that important knight d6 as a blockade. But okay, let's move on to the next position here. Once again, we are not trying to focus entirely on the entire game here. We're just trying to see different breaks and how to go about different positions. So let's load the next game. Now here you can see that queen h5, we had seen something very similar yesterday also, some tactical resources. So you have knight g5 with an attack on h7. What if he plays h6 here? What would you do in this position now? You have the two bishops, the position is open, but we have just seen this pawn structure a moment or two ago. White also has some weaknesses, black also has some weaknesses. White has a nice space advantage with this d5 e5 pawn. Let's just put them in green. White has the pair of bishops, but similarly white also has some weaknesses. And what is an important weakness that you have, like could be detrimental to us in the long run? Can anybody highlight and tell me immediately? Like okay, bishop h6 is tactical resource, but that is not what we're looking for. I don't think it's working also, but can you highlight the weaknesses here? Any weakness that could be exploited for us somewhere later down the road? A weakness in white's point, I'm saying, okay, in white's camp. Any pawn, anything like that? Like, do you see something? Bishop captures h6. Everybody is bishop captures h6 here. Sacrifice is the way to go, is it? It's probably not working, but we will have a look anyways in a moment. But first, let me highlight some weaknesses or so that could be a problem. Like possible weaknesses, c4 square is one thing that white will have to worry about, and c2 in case white did not have this bishop. What are the important things that white has to worry about is he should not try to exchange these bishops on the board. Immediately c2 will come under attack, and c4 will be a strong weakness that we'll have to worry about. a3 also is a relative weakness. So if you can get rid of your weaknesses, that would also be good. Like if you find a way to get rid of your weaknesses, that would be a good idea. So which move would you do to get rid of your weaknesses? a3 is indeed a weakness. Let's highlight it in red. c2 also is a weakness. d6 is a weakness for your opponent, yes. But your knight, I don't think has a way to get there this immediately. So let's wait for a moment and then later do it, Manoj. I completely agree, Anish and all. a3 is a weakness. So what move would you think of? c2 is a weakness, a3 is a weakness. What do you think is black planning to do? Let's say I play something like h3. Okay, just giving you a move. What do you think black will do in this position? Let me flip it for you. What would black do in this position? Automatically you will understand which move white should also play. What would black do here? Let's first quickly get what black would do in this position. Then we'll quickly go to what white should do. I'm sure everybody in the chat have already got what white should do in this position. But what should black do here? Anybody? Bishop a4 is exactly the move that we're looking for, because this keeps this weakness here, attacks the c2 weakness, and c3 again, right, is a let's look at now from white point of view. c3 again, right, don't unnecessarily push c3. This is also one more thing, like your pieces can be useful outside also. Somebody said d6 is a weakness. Like how would you exploit it? Right now the knight is not reaching there, the bishop can reach there, but you play c3, you have blocked that resource altogether. In the previous position, like this is how you relate your ideas. In one of the game's 4 knights, we had seen the bishop come out to c1 and a3. Unfortunately, that square is also blocked right now. Not really possible. So c3 is not really ideal here, because unnecessary pawn push and you're blocking your own ideas. If possible, you should avoid it. So the move that is best here is to play a4 and You can try to even get rid of a weakness with a5. You still keep your options of bishop b4 and try to use your bishop actively, and you can immediately activate the rook straight away here with a5. Both your rooks can come into game. And secondly, black played a5 here. What has happened on the board now? Exact, pieces should not protect the pawn, but that's exactly what black is trying to do. He played a5 so that pieces should protect the pawn, is what black is saying. Well, I think you should answer him back. What do you think? What do you think first happened on the board? Like, we had seen this pattern. Can anybody first highlight that simple thing? You have a small thing happened, changed in the position here. White had one weakness on c2, which is called. Anybody in the chat would like to answer? Well, c2 is a backward pawn. Similarly, b6 also is now a backward pawn on the board. Let me get rid of the arrows. b6 indeed is a backward pawn that has happened because black played a5. Well, his reasoning was if a5 comes, then white's all pieces will get activated and it'll be very easy. So a5 is definitely not a bad move, but you have a weakness now. Focus on the weakness. By the way, one more, like somebody asked me, like, why not play c3 and focus entirely on the queen side? See, king side. Actually, right, to be honest with you, if you have seen this game, right, this game is by Kamsky and the rook was on h1 here. Sorry, rook was on g1 here actually, okay? And the guy played rook b1, b6 and king f1. So his rook was already on g1 and he didn't go for something desperate or something immediate like g4 in the position. See, why he didn't do that is because he can see that he can easily create a second point of weakness on the king queen side too. It's very easy to create something there, initiate some weaknesses. So in case his attack doesn't work, then maybe he can also have something on the queen side, an endgame or so, that can easily exploit. Also, if you desperately go for an attack like g4 and all, black is also equally having some resources. It's not like your attack is immediately going to mate the king. So preferably avoid c3, but yes, that would also be another way to play. You just give him a little bit of tactical resources and ideas. For example, let's say you play king e2, okay? Now your idea is to start an attack on the offense on the king side. I play bishop a4. Suddenly you play c3. Can anybody tell me what you would do here in this position as black? White is trying to initiate like g4 and go for the offense. But what has he missed out on? He has missed out on something here immediately, guys. Come on. What has he missed out on? c3 is not really working. What do we have here? Rook e8 is what you will play. Queen e8 would also be decent here. Like queen e8 also would be decent. The idea is some knight f4 and stopping here. And also if white gives you a chance, right? Queen e8 also is a very smart move. Now, I think everybody knows that knight f4 will win the queen. But we'll not focus on that. We will focus on one more thing that is possible for black with queen e8. It is to play bishop b5 and get rid of that bishops. This bishop is going to be very resourceful in the attack on the king side. So if you get rid of it, now you understand why exactly white didn't go in the way you wanted to. Just rash attack on the king side, because there are some possibilities for black on the queen side, some tactical possibilities, some positional ideas, and then suddenly your attack is not really good. One more thing is, his knights are not really doing anything. But if you play g4 and start your offense, right, the knight will automatically come back to life. He will get a square on f5, etc. to immediately improve his position. Like you're helping him actually improve it. So white didn't do this, but okay, knight f4, okay, I understand queen e8 has two ideas, stopping a4, planning some bishop b5 and knight f4. That is also a good move. But even bishop a4 c3, rook into c3, I think people got it in the chat here. Rook into c3 is a nice move here, exploiting white's positioning of pieces. Knight f4 and you have a nice 4 coming on the board. So unnecessarily don't rush into attack. Don't make weaknesses and give your opponent some hope. If you don't give him hope, he will not have anything on the in the game to play about. Now, what we'll do is, let's say we play a4, a5. We'll see how we exploit this position. Sometimes, once you have done this, you tend to play bb5 or like support the pawn, like with knight e1. I've seen this happen, and play bb5 and immediately try to go about exchanges and continue in the game. That is not very ideal always. You can try to simply exploit his weaknesses. So I'll show you how exactly white played in the game. Rook b2, rook b8, and now you can see that instead of going for a rash attack, there is nothing happening immediately on the board. White played this move queen h3 and started like improving his queen to the other side of the board, slowly trying to improve. Black played queen c7, white played white played queen g3, and basically if you see queen g3, then one of his ideas was to start with h4, h5, and then he can exploit the weaknesses. Again, he's not going for something rash with g4, but rather slowly progressing. He just took care of all black's ideas, kept it simple. He had one target here, but the main point is that he is not going to allow ever black to play b5, unnecessarily not going to play c3, because let's say this has happened, like not like this actually, let's say this has happened. With c3 you would not have anything. Without c3 though, you have some nice tactical ideas also possible. So unnecessarily you don't want to push your pawns here in this position. One more idea in this position besides rook b2 would be to play bishop c1, and somebody wanted to take the d6 square, they can also take it that way. And yes, rook Akshay asking me like why not rook b1. Well, do you really want to give the a4 pawn just like this? It's not really planning that, right? Bishop a4 is immediately coming on the board, so you don't want to do that. You don't want to give your opponent chances and hope for counterplay unnecessarily. I don't think this is even working. You're just losing a pawn for nothing. And that's exactly what you want to avoid in the position. But basically, you just see what exactly he did. Just simple chess, a4, did not unnecessarily push his pawns, and slowly went on to exploit his weaknesses. Let's move on. 1 minute. We'll see a similar structure again, same kind of position, just a different, slightly different here, because here we have the same kind of position on the board, but some of the pieces are missing and white is now castled on the king side here. So let's again see how to push our pawns and how do we stop all of his ideas. White to play, I mean, first move, I'm sure people are looking at queen into b6. So what do you think about queen into b6? Is it working? Is it the best thing to do, or can you do better? You have some weaknesses that are available for you, and you have some weaknesses yourself, unfortunately. So what do we do? First thing, you should always verify that you're winning material. Can we just go for it? If it's possible, then of course the pawn will always be better. But sometimes capturing the material is actually detrimental. Like capturing that pawn is actually helping him get counterplay. So let's say you play queen b6. He plays something like, he can play rook b8, but there is one more move which is possible here. Like we won a pawn, but down the road what we'll want to do is we want to create something of that pawn. Right now we have a weak pawn on c3. We want to push c4 and create a pass pawn. So I'll show you what black can do in this position apart from rook b8. Okay, rook b8 also is possible, but there's one more move which is nice here, is a4. We tend to forget about such simple moves sometimes, which can be very strong, because after a4 his simple plan is to exploit your weak pawn on c3, and maybe if you move your queen somewhere, you leave the knight a5 square, then knight will jump in onto the c4 square, and you can't even do rook b1. Or can you? Maybe you can. Okay, you can. Maybe here you will have to capture and find some tactical resource to work. Is this working? I don't know. But okay, if you cannot really capture, then you cannot play rook b1 again. And one more idea for black is also to play knight a7 and improve his knight to b5. Again, exploiting all of the weak pawns that you have. Maybe even the bishop joins the party from f8. So basically capturing the pawn has given him as much play that you probably shouldn't be capturing the pawn here, is what you should understand. If you push something like a4, same thing, we have seen it multiple times now. Weak pawn on b6, backward pawn, you have another pawn on b5, sorry, d5, but you're in no rush to immediately capture the pawn. Let's say this way he's not getting b5. Let's say he plays something like knight a7 trying to do the same thing. Now maybe capturing on b6 is different because it doesn't have the same squares. He cannot really capture here because you're already getting a pass pawn also on top of that, maybe something else also. Or you can even take it slowly, just defend this pawn here with, let's say, actually not defend this pawn, we have to stop b5. Let's take care of rook b1 here, then we can defend the pawn even by maneuvering using a bishop to defend it, and then maybe go for the b6 pawn. This can be done, but basically you have some important weaknesses that's very easy to play against with a4. Now in the game he went with knight, actually I don't have the game, but okay, I think he went with knight d8 if I remember, and then tried to improve to knight e6. But then white just captured queen b6 and went on to win very easily. He attacked this pawn, but white, but I don't remember the game. But this is not the most important part. I mean, white has so many things he can do here. Can capture also, some tactical resources also. But okay, that's not the most important thing. We're just looking at different ways to improve. And later tomorrow again we'll be doing the piece placement and how to utilize pieces effectively also. And here again we'll do more positions on this only. Let's see different more positions. Again the same kind of structure but just a different this one. Yes, let's load the game. And yeah, so here we have another same kind of position on the board but slightly different because we have a different structure here. I mean, the isolated that backward pawn is there, but this time the few differences are white. There is something going on in the center too, and you're missing a dark square bishop. So black has the bishop pair. What do you think? Yes, definitely. All the structures, those we will do again. Maybe tomorrow also we could repeat the same kind of exercises along with piece placement. We have time, so we can do it 14 days. So we can again repeat the same thing tomorrow also and do more and go detailed of the openings, possible openings, and the different structures involving those openings. So we can cover some of the most important openings or the most played openings and see different ideas, whichever, however much we can cover. We can do that tomorrow, guys. Again, based on pawn structure, but this will be more about how to play in those pawn structures, like not just about the pawns, but about your pieces too. Now here you have a slightly different. What do you think you would do in this position? You have to try to understand which exchanges are good, which transpositions of structures are good for us, what you shouldn't allow or what you should allow in certain positions, and it also depends on your opponent's pieces. So here now, white to play, what do you think you would do here? Just maintain it as it is, move the queen back, or play rook c1, rook c2, play rook b1 to push pressure on b6, or do you think you should capture on d5 here? How would you make this decision? Black is threatening dc4, agreed, Karthik. Black is indeed threatening dc4. So that's why I said, like, you play rook c1, because still dc4 you can take queen c4. It's not like you're lost. But what do you think you would do here? Is cd5 a good trade? Because, see, generally we have this structure here. You don't want to give away your bishop in those structures, right? So you don't want to give away because that's an important piece for your king safety. So is it okay to exchange the bishops, allow him to play bishop d5? Or do you think, like some people have already mentioned, queen b3 or queen e2, move that queen out of the way? You like doubling the rooks? Okay. You like doubling the rooks, Binay? Nice to see you in the chat here. But what about the point when I asked you, like, exchanging the bishops, is that okay in this position? Is there anything else that black can do which can create problems? Let's say you double up the rooks here and I play push bishop b4 here. Is that going to be a problem? Let's just get rid of this arrows. Rook b1, bishop b4. You double up the rooks, I play bishop b4. Rook c1. Rook c1, you should be aware of other tactical resources also. Sometimes it can be like an issue. Like generally it's better, safer, always safer approach to put your rook c. Rook c1 doesn't really do anything at all. Like it doesn't really threaten cd5 either because rook is hanging. Unnecessarily, you don't want to do that, preferably. And also some bishop a3 ideas can sometimes be annoying. Here, I don't think you're able to exploit it, but sometimes it can be very annoying. Luckily, you're getting through. Like queen is coming under attack, so no time for bishop a3. And once again, the knight is again defending the a3 square, luckily. But okay, that is not really a tactic possible, but preferably rook c2 is always better in such situations. Yeah, rook b1, the problem is, let's say after bishop b4, you're not going to give away your exchange, right? So basically, you should immediately decide where your focus will be. Your focus will be mostly, you could try to exploit this pawn in the later stages, but right now it's not really possible. I understand that I've told you earlier, like exploiting that weak pawn. It's not always the case. You cannot always exploit the same thing. Just because it's a backward pawn, it's not really always possible. Sometimes you have to shift your focus. So the better way to continue would be either move away your queen or c into d5. Which one do you think is better? No, keeping the tension actually, right? That's the point. Like keeping the tension is not going to be that useful. Like queen b3 also, right? He plays bishop b4. Your queen is not doing anything here anyway. Like now you'll have to do something. You're stuck here. He's planning bishop d2, maybe dc4 or maybe dc4. Immediately you're not getting anything. You're not able to move your knight. Nothing is happening much here. You're giving, the more you keep this tension, the more possibilities you're giving your opponent to have. Like so cd5 actually is the better choice to go with here immediately. You can change the structure. Ask him a question immediately. Either he wants to keep the bishop pair and get himself an isolated pawn, then we have something to play against. We don't want to play only on this structure, but this pawn here, but we can focus on the d5 weakness. Maybe take over the d4 square. His king is also, by the way, very weak. Again, the main reason is g7 h6. This is also important because if you have a light square bishop and you shift it to this diagonal, this beautiful long diagonal somehow, he will be in bigger problems and bigger mess there because of his h6 g6 structure that weakens his king also. And if he takes bishop d5, the exchange is actually helping us because let's say bishop d5, once again e d5 as a pawn to play against, sorry. And if he plays rook d5, what's the right thing to do? Go for exchanges, and queen c4, you can immediately try to target the c7 b6 weaknesses. Queen into c4, knight c4, pawn up straight away. So this is the way you would continue and make your decision where exactly which is better. Like here, the tension was better for black. He would try to get some tactical resources, bishop a3, some pins. You're always in some kind of mess here, right? So better to play c into d5. B into d5 is the most logical response, but I would say I would play e into d5 here because it's the much better way to at least keep some tension. This will do some other time, guys, like how to play actively in a bad position, like what to do, what is the best way to continue. One simple principle is keep more pieces. So bishop d5 makes your opponent, makes it very easy. Unless you're only playing for a draw, you're like, okay, I'm able to hold the draw somehow, then it's okay to go for these exchanges. Otherwise it would be better to keep more pieces on the board in an inferior position. We'll do those exercises later, but here cd5 was the right capture, giving him a bad position there. Yes. Now actually we'll do a few let's say will involve some endgame this also, and a few positions from there. Now here you have the bishop pair. Again, the pawn structure is very symmetrical. What would you do? What kind would you go for a break? Would you try to yeah, good positional understanding is important to God of, like, most important right now for 1000, like, it's important to do tactics, like try to get acquainted with different tactics. That's the best thing to do. You can definitely watch videos, etc., streams, etc., to learn some positional ideas, get some positional ideas, but at the moment you can focus a lot on tactics, because also there is one more thing, like I don't want you to get bored immediately. People tend to get bored, so you can keep a right balance, but one thing is, don't focus too much on openings. This is one important thing. People tend to focus too much on openings and spoil their chess. This is a better way to learn chess. Try to look at middle game and end game more often. Solve tactics all the time. That will help you improve. There is the method. Yeah, there are many methods like that, but basically we are trying to get acquainted with every aspect of it. You, let's say, depending on what your game strength is, you have been playing for a while, depending on, like, it depends on what you kind of thing is it, but this is just for general improvement. You can also have specific improvement, etc. Like, it depends on what is it depends. I will have to see what exactly, then it can give you an idea. Cannot just give a general this we are doing generally, just trying to improve all over. Like, let's say backward pawn will not be maybe useful to some people here, but generally it's a good idea to get everything, like, acquainted with everything, especially if you're starting fresh. If you just let's say know everything, all tactics, and you don't know how to win a pawn end game and a queen end game, then that will not really work, right? But it depends on you. Let's say you know everything about that, then maybe there is something that you're lacking and you should try to improve on that. uh, Yeah, so here now let's say we are trying to progress. We have to sometimes create pawn breaks, or sometimes use a pieces. But let's say we want to use a pieces and finish this position. We go bishop e8. Black is having a defense. So in order to restrict these pieces further, sometimes we have to use our pawns too in this position. What would you do in this scenario? Sometimes pawn breaks, sometimes pawn sacrifices, and that needs some understanding and some calculation, of course, but some understanding is more important at the start. Like, how do you do this breaks, what kind of pawn breaks you look for in this position, and also it depends on what important threats your opponent has here. So let's say I showed you one way. The second way would be to just enter with your king. This is the first thing you should do. Look for ways for your pieces without moving your pawns unnecessarily, whether you can create holes and improvements. King e5, black has a defense here, prevents you from entering, and then goes back to b6. Or maybe even utilizes his king and then maybe looks forward to g1. He's also not going to just sit down here, so he has some ideas. So sometimes now it's maybe he's having a plan, maybe he's planning bishop g1, etc. So you have to look for a way to work around. Okay, somebody's saying h3 and bishop e8. Yes, okay, so you're right, Neve. That's definitely the best way to continue. But this is like based on understanding, and sometimes you have to use your intuition also. The right way to break here is to play h3 and g4. But first thing, what would you want to do in these positions? Like, unnecessarily should not go for it. If it's the only thing possible, then you should go for it. Like, let's say we want to prepare for it, we would play bishop e1, play h3, and then go g4. But sometimes, like, your opponent also is having ideas, right? He might have some tactical resources, suddenly he might be winning. Then it becomes necessary to look for ideas which are direct and immediate. And that h3 move indeed works, which can be supported by a little bit of calculation. But the main idea is, guys, bishop e8, and these pawns are set up in a line here, like g6 h5. This wouldn't be really good if he had like pawn on h7 or so. Black would be able to defend. But here, since his pawns are in a line, these pawns are more difficult to attack. Your bishops will do much better immediately snapping all those pawns along the way. And one more thing is to make the decision. Bishop g1 could be possible somewhere when you try to utilize a bishop. Right now this is a weakness, but bishop g1, and he can try to anyways make you play h3 and make some weaknesses there. So h3 was played in the game, knight into g3 and bishop e8, and white went on to win this. We're not concerned too much about that. But what if I don't capture the pawn? Let's say I just sit down with knight d6. How would you improve this position? Thanks a lot, Varun Raste. Glad that you're here on our stream. Once again, guys, if you do enjoy it, then definitely hit the like button and subscribe. We'll be doing this for the next 14 days, and that's definitely not the end. Yes, exactly. Nightbot, you said it right. Bishop e1, etc. You would slowly try to improve, but sometimes, like I showed you, like there are some resources. Black has some checks, annoying checks coming there. So that's why white went with h3 immediately. We know why it works. That is supported by some of a calculation. Like, little bit you'll have to calculate in the game. Not everything can be done by understanding, and that's why you hopefully solve tactics. But now let's say he plays simple chess. Bishop e8, knight d6 will not work. Immediately, yes. Bishop e8, knight d6 will not work. You're right about that. And complex positions, you'll have to solve a little bit harder tactics, Tushar. Like, if you're only doing those easy tactics, then you are not visiting the complex positions. Either you solve harder tactics, and one more way to improve is whatever live games are happening recently, your follow chess app is there, and all this online resources, chess.com, etc. You tend to see live games happening around the world, right? Spectate the games and try to guess their moves. Most likely stronger players will have complicated positions on the board. You try to guess the moves. If you get it right, or even if you get 1 out of 30 right, 30 moves that happened on the board, 1 out of 30, that's a good start. Slowly, you will get a feel as to how players are playing these complex positions, and you will improve. You will not only improve by solving tactics and playing the games, this is also one more thing to try to help you get there. This is not my game, but I have played many different games similar to this, which I will show you as well in the coming streams. Like I will show you some of my important games, my crucial games, my crucial decisions based on positional understanding, etc. How I went about it, why I went about it, why I made certain moves. A lot of things to come, guys. So do join us every day. Yeah, exactly. Like Vikas, you're right about that. Take it slowly here. Don't immediately commit to one plan or the other. Maybe bishop c1. I don't think it is winning. Whoever said bishop c1, you don't give away your piece like bishop immediately. You can do it a move or two later, right? Like here, you did not have the choice. You did not have time because he was coming up with some ideas of his own. Now, after you play knight here, let's try to restrict. He doesn't have any immediate check, any idea, right? Doesn't have bishop f2. We don't have to worry here. He's losing a pawn. You also have g4. Now it's time to take it slow. Just play bishop d3. Slowly, you can improve with g4 and give that break. But basically, you're not allowing knight into b5 to come. And next, how about doing bishop c1, bishop a3? How about like he plays something? If you feel like bishop b5, go back to b5. Take your time. People forget that they can go back in certain endgames or certain positions like this. But one thing you cannot take back is a pawn. You push pawn, then you will never be able to take it back. So pieces can be maneuvered here and there. You don't need to rush. Take your time, take it easy. Especially if you have, let's say, 30 seconds. I'm just giving you a nice tip here. 30 seconds on the clock. You don't have time. There is increment in the game. Most of the games on the board have increment. Play some few moves here and there. People forget that they can repeat a couple of moves. Don't repeat 3 times. Don't repeat the position 3 times. Couple of moves here and there, gain some time, then go with the plan. Because if you immediately rush into g4 and luck somehow your opponent finds something and some tactic that you missed, you have only 30 seconds. You will not be able to spot the best resource or end up losing some material or something can go wrong. How about just play bishop and gain some time? But see that your opponent doesn't have any ideas, okay? Slowly you can improve and play g4. Let's say he plays f5. How would you go about now? See what he's doing. Maybe take care of it if it's needed and then continue with your idea. It's also an important tip to keep in mind. Like I'm sure that people have already spotted that they can do king here and king f6 and enter. See if your opponent has anything in return for that. Is there something after king f6 or before king f6 that you have to worry about? Don't forget that. Don't definitely play g4 immediately if it's not needed. No need to sacrifice a pawn if it's not immediately needed in this position. So you can go about it slowly. Take your time. You see that maybe he has bishop f2. Maybe you go king e5. I'll just show you what happens. Like sometimes people forget, they only think about, oh, everything is under control. Suddenly knight e4 comes and a shock is given to them, and then suddenly this pawn is queening and you're no longer winning. That is exactly what you don't want to allow in the game. So take your time, verify your ideas, and then see, okay, maybe king e5, I cannot really go here. How about I think of bishop b5? Maybe that is winning. Maybe that is not really needed. Let's play bishop c3, play slowly, get rid of the knight, push him even back, and then move and improve our position. Simple way, right? Bishop c3, bishop e5. That's the best. No time for this, losing a piece. And he goes here, kick him away. He cannot come here, you just win a pawn. He goes back somewhere, let's say here, kick him even further. You just created an opening for your king. Now you can go to the other side and maybe even focus on this side of the board. The knight is just being pushed further and further. No counterplay whatsoever. This is the way you would play. Maybe also I'll give you one more just example or idea here. Let's say king e5, major idea there. You can also play bishop e1, support that. Take care of anything to do here and then try to think of playing king e5 or king f6. That is also another way you would continue. And pawn breakthrough also, like g4 would be the way. If you had just not played f5, you can slowly improve g5, restrict him even further, then maybe improve your bishop and try to get your pieces. Depending on the piece, of course, like it will depend on what pieces you have, right? Exchanges. But okay, we were focusing more on the pawns. And I think we'll see if I can give you a couple of more, and then we can. Uh, okay. Yeah, we'll do one exercise here before, and then we can continue on the same topic tomorrow, guys. So do join us at 7 o'clock once again tomorrow. Let me load the last position today. And you can see something very crazy happening here. Black's white pieces are all on the back foot here completely. Let's look at it from black's side point of view. And black played h5 break, but one thing he did not do is immediately rush into his ideas with hg4 and all. Now white is planning something with b4 on the other side. The position is completely locked out. So if you make a small mistake, or if your tactics don't work out, then white will be able to hold. How would you try to continue in this position? I'm sure everybody is already looking at tactics, and yes, maybe some tactics do work here, but take your time, verify, and see what you can do better, if you can do anything better, and accordingly decide what you would do here. Black to play, guys, what you would do in this position. Thanks a lot, Atul. Atul will be streaming tonight, I think, at 9:30. So you can also join his stream. I think he's streaming end games at the moment. So you can also check him out, learn something there too. And thanks a lot, guys. Here, new, can definitely hit the like button and subscribe. That would be really helpful. Now, here, what would you do? You can definitely go. Thanks a lot, Karthik. Thanks a lot. So I've been telling you since the start, like, don't rush. And rush is playing h into g4 unless it works, of course. If you'll have something which works, it's great. Otherwise, take a step back and relax, and then see what you can improve further, whether it's needed to rush here, whether it's not. His pieces are anyways tied down. That is what you need to understand. Is he able to improve with hgh5? Is he able to do anything really complicated on that side of the board that we are really concerned about? Maybe not. Maybe he will be playing b4 here. Depending on that, right, you can make a choice. Knight g6, b4 is coming on the board. So you can definitely think of knight g6, and most of you all thinking of knight g6 here. See, there are multiple problems with this move, which we'll look at. Like, let's say knight g6. What if I just play bishop e1? Or what if I even allow you to play on that side? Is it really, like, are you getting anything further here? What if I play b4? Sorry, not a4, definitely. b4. You capture, my rook just got activated, my queen is coming. Do you have a mate on that side of the board? Oh my god, what is happening here? Rook a7, do you have a mate on that side of the board? Are you fast enough? Are you willing to go knight h4 and crush your opponent? If not, then you can take a step back and just prevent your opponent's ideas. That's it. You are anyways having this up your sleeve. You can do this anytime at g4. You can do your sacrifices anytime. Improve your position anytime. How about just take care of his ideas at the moment? Simply knight c6. Try to see if you can instate more weaknesses on that side of the board. Let's say your opponent is smart enough. He wants to still play b4. Plays queen b1. What can you do here now? Again, this is just a way that I'm just showing you. Of course, like, you can probably think of whether you can go at g4 and crush your opponent also. Sometimes some sacrifices, which we'll look at just in a moment. What other things that you can do in this position? Use your pawns more effectively. But sometimes this way also is quite useful. Knight c6, just stop b4. Queen b1, he's still planning b4. Again, just stop b4. That's it. This is the point, like, this is very useful in situations where you're low on time, etc. You can just take a step back, wait for him to commit, and then you will probably get your ideas, tactical ideas going sometime or the other. For example, I just move queen e7. I just put pressure on the a3 pawn. Simultaneously, I stop b4. Now, if white is desperate enough to just do b4 because he feels like peace activity, I mean, this is anyways winning for us. Without even complicating things, his knights are dead. Here, king is stuck there. Rook is stuck on g2 in the process. Clearly not really helping. Let's say he defends with b2. Then you can take your time and see what you can do next. If you cannot really improve, you can always play a waiting move and just wait down. But then you can think of whether you can improve it tactically. You stop the main important thing on that side. You can shift your pieces also back there. Like let's say we have diverted the queen to the other side, then maybe you can think of whether you can go for some sacrifices, knight e4, etc. Whether you want to do a g4 immediately. This was just a point to highlight here. Like you should not really rush into the variation always. You can take your own time and see if you can better it. Not always is knight g6 the best way. Now I'll show you one more thing that white can change, and he can go hg4, but after fg4 he goes for something a little bit unique here. Can you tell me what he did here in this position? Any plans that you would have? This would need a little bit of calculation, but not always the best idea actually. Okay, not always the best idea. Let me just check if this is the exact position, whether he can go with this 23. Actually, this is not the exact position, guys, but like the point of my this was like knight into e4, but this is not the exact position to do it. Actually, I have misplayed the game. The knight was not here in that position. So my idea was queen into e4, and once I move the queen back, the pawn will push, and I'm able to utilize my pieces effectively. Unfortunately, here I think he's able to stop me from pushing, and this is what is happening. I rushed into my plan, and thus I am not in a good position anymore. That's what you don't want to do. He's getting queen e2, and he's able to stop my e4 idea altogether. But I think the position that I was looking at the knight was not here; it was here. So I misplayed it slightly, and my point was to play knight c6 here. So okay, that's a different position altogether. But let's say I can try something here. Maybe I can try to maybe play rook b8 and play on the other side of the board. So this is another thing. Like we saw this game in one of the previous positions where white had something going on the king side, but suddenly shifted his attack to the queen side. Now he can play b5 and actually start targeting white on that side of the board. Suddenly the focus has completely changed to the other side, and white cannot do anything because all his pieces are on the other side of the board. Unfortunately, rook cannot come in, and the moment you see remotely that your opponent is starting to shift his attack, like you can take a breather, maybe one, let's say we play one waiting move, just not really showing off, and suddenly we come all the way back and like start smashing on the king side. So that is a nice way. Principle of two weaknesses. You can even shift your focus from one end to the other. If you feel like this rook is going to be annoying, let's say we push b5, he pushes rook f1 like this, you can think of sacrificing something, but you can also just shift your focus entirely to this, suddenly opening up some room for other resources, tactical ideas, etc. This is the way you can play it out. So guys, I think this is it. Like today we'll stop here, but once again we'll continue with the same things tomorrow, but we'll focus more on the opening aspect of it, like from which opening certain pawn structures, how to play your pieces in those structures, etc. And same time tomorrow, 7 o'clock. So do join us, and if you have enjoyed it thus far, if you like my this work, then you can definitely hit the like button. Any suggestions can be given in the comment section below, and we'll see you soon tomorrow. Until then, have a nice evening. Bye.